12, 2018 Board of Education. Could we have a roll call, please?
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is written communication. Dr. Davis, do we have any written communication?
We have no written communication at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're at information items. The first item is the report on student achievement and the school report card. Who's going
Yes,
to?
and good evening, Board. Drs. Bavis and Levy are coming forward. I'll just mention that this is an annual report that we always do at this time because we have to wait until we get the final state reports and everything back. And we're right on schedule, which means the state was pretty much on schedule this year, which is good. And this is our annual achievement report and related to the school report card. So Dr. Bavis, are you going to begin?
Yes, I'll kick us off. Just a little background. I'm going to go fairly quickly through the upfront slides and then turn it over to Carrie. We have partnered with NERA to look at our multiple measures, and they reported on that last time in terms of progress. This achievement report, though, is particular to the Illinois ESSA state plan. And what we've done is we've looked at the same thing we looked at last year. Some of those academic indicators are a GPA of 2.8 or greater, 95% attendance, at least one ELA academic indicator, at least one mathematics academic indicator. More to come. English language arts academic indicator, a student must attain one of the following. Take an English language arts AP course. That means that a student must take either AP language and composition or AP literature and composition and earn an A, B, or C, or an AP exam score of 3 or higher on one of those exams. Or they can meet the reading and writing SAT subject score of 480 or higher, or an ACT English score. We use the ACT English score because it was a carryover. Previously it was the ACT English score of 18 or higher and an ACT reading subject score of 22 or higher. So it's a series of ORs, and you have to meet one of those. I'm going to point out that this is a considerably higher bar than the mathematics bar. Here's the mathematics bar. Taking Algebra 2 and earning an A, B, or C. Right away, you'll notice that with the 2 algebra course, that's pretty much a universal course here at ETHS. All students take 2 algebra. All students do not take AP English courses at ETHS. So right away, there's a discrepancy there in terms of the benchmark. You can take a math AP course, earn an A, B, or C. That would be AP Calculus AB, Calculus BC, or AP Statistics. You can earn a score of 3 or higher as well, or you can get a subject math score of 530 on the SAT, or an ACT math score of 22 or higher. Definitions, this looks at 4-year cohorts. Class of 2017 and class of 2018 cohorts. It includes students who graduated in 4 years and those who did not. It report disaggregates by race and gender, that's new this year, meal status, IEP placement. Data is more granular than what is found in the Illinois report card. It is more contextual and relevant to ETHS. Indicators align with how ISB plans to report college readiness except for one key distinction. The report that we do includes College Board SAT benchmarks, not Illinois State Board of Ed benchmarks. I'll have more on that later. And our attendance rate is across 4 years of high school, whereas the state attendance looks at benchmarks over junior and senior year. We feel that this gives a more comprehensive picture. I'm going to turn it over to Carrie now, and she's going to walk us through what the cohorts mean and what we looked at.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. All right, so here are our cohorts. And like Pete said, different from past years, we've disaggregated by the intersection of race and gender. So this is the class of 2017 that we reported on last year. This is new, the class of 2018. This is the number of students in each subgroup and the percent of within that cohort. So these number of students throughout the whole report, when we look at percents, meeting any of the benchmarks, it's of these number. This is the number for other students in each of the cohorts, and that's consistent throughout. Okay, so a few highlights. So just for the class of 2018 highlights. So for all students, and these highlights are for all students, the report provides more details disaggregated by race and gender, meal status, and whether or not they have IEP placement. So 2/3, 65% achieved a GPA of 2.8 or greater and had a mean cumulative GPA of 3.0. So there's a couple areas where I've added a little bit more context. I'm going to get to that. One is GPA and one is attendance. We'll talk about that in a little bit more in a moment. Average attendance rate across 4 years of high school was 93%. 2/3, 68% met one or more of the proficiency indicators in English language arts, and 84% of students, all students, met one or more of the proficiency indicators in mathematics. Almost 80%, 79% had no more than 4 behavioral referrals throughout 4 years of high school, so that's an average of 1 a year across 4 years. And then 3/4, just over 3/4, participated in at least one extracurricular activity. So before we get into more of the details of it, you had this summary chart. I've split it up in your report. It's all one, but so it's kind of small on the PowerPoint, so I split it in half. So this just is a visual representation of the percent of students that are meeting or exceeding these college readiness benchmarks, the 4 benchmarks: the GPA, attendance, at least one of the English language arts, and at least one of the mathematics indicators. And so the black bar across the orange and red is the percent of and the numbers that are pulled out is the percent that are meeting 3 or 4, like 3 or all of the indicators. And this is now disaggregated. You see all students along the top. So 64% of all students met or exceeded like all of these benchmarks, 3 or 4 of the benchmarks. And then this is disaggregated by race, by gender. And then it continues, and the next slide has the rest of that chart. This is just the 2018. We have a similar chart in the report for 2017. So let's just look at the indicators that are underneath that. So the first one is a GPA, and this is the state's cut, in which we know whatever nearer work comes out may be different for us next year, but looking at what the ISB benchmarks are, a cumulative GPA of 2.8 or higher, when we look at the percent of students who have a 2.8 or higher, we see that in the class of 2018, it's 65%. And then from the class of 2017, it was 63%. To give a little more context of what that means, we added in mean GPA. So all students have an average mean GPA of 3.0. And you can see that this chart now is looking at it just by race, ethnicity. So we can, the way I'm structured this, so you can look at, so for example, we can see Black African American students have a 2.5, 40% have a 2.8 GPA or higher, but the mean is 2.5. If we look at it disaggregated by race and gender, we have a little bit more information. You see our Black females had a 2.7 mean GPA, our Black males have a 2.3. And so when we look at the mean by race, ethnicity, when we then disaggregate by gender, it gives us a little bit more information and to see where we have differences, areas of success, and areas of growth. Across these, in the GPA, we can see our females by the subgroups outperform males. Looking similar to attendance, so the state is going to look at 95% attendance in junior, senior year. We just looked at across all 4 years, what percent of our students met that 95% attendance benchmark. And then where we see, to give it a little bit more context, like what does that really mean and how are our students doing, we added our mean attendance rate across all 4 years. So for example, And all students, 59% met that 95% benchmark, but all students, their average, their mean attendance rate was 93%. So it's just below the 95% benchmark. We can see it here, disaggregated by race, ethnicity. And then to add a little bit more context to pull that apart, it's by race and gender. And then we also have, for all of these, free reduced lunch, meal status, and has an IEP. So we can see that the percent of students who met that 95% attendance across 4 years varies, but when we look at their mean attendance rate across 4 years, all of them are above 90%. It just makes it, gives a little more context around what that, meeting that 95% benchmark, where they're like just under it.
I'm sorry, Carrie, I just want to ask a clarifying question. So, but didn't Pete say that the way ISB does it is look only at 2 years versus 4? And your numbers reflect 4 full years?
All 4 years.
Okay,
4 years.
thank you.
Yes. They're going to look at junior and senior year. I think that's students who are grade 11, 12. There's a lot of nuances in that. And so I'm not sure how they're going to do that. And at the very end, I'm going to show how they're going to put this whole out. They did the summative designation. And so it just is cleaner and it kind of more full picture across 4 years instead of just focusing on junior and senior. There's research that has shown that it's freshman year that matters the most. So for now, until we have more information, I think a picture of 4 years is where I'm going with this. So the English language benchmarks, like Pete had introduced in the beginning, taking an English language AP and earning a C or better, or taking the exam and getting a 3 or higher, an SAT of 480. We'll talk about later on why we're using the 480, the College Board's benchmark, instead of the ISB benchmark, which is much higher. And then the ACT. The class of 2017 is the last class that has the ACT. Just for memory, we had ACT, it was part of the state test, then there was PARC, and then we didn't have a test for our juniors, so the district administered the ACT to all students for 2 years. And so we had over 90% of our students participate. Class of 2017, it was not like state mandated, but they participated. And then class of 2018 is the first year that all juniors had the SAT as their state administered test. So we're in flux, and now we are, so by next year I'll have 2 years of SAT. So I'm comparing class of 2017 and their, in there it's all of that, but their ACT as opposed to SAT. Just a point of reference for that. So here we have all students, so 68% of all students met one or more of the English language arts benchmarks. One way to interpret this, when we look at our Hispanic Latinx students, we see an increase of 45% to 51% between class of 2017 and class of 2018. When we look at it disaggregated by race and gender, we can pull apart and see that our Latino males had a large increase from 39% meeting one or more of those benchmarks to 52%. So this is just an example of how pulling it apart a little more gives us a little bit more context and lets us look and see where some areas of success are and how students are doing. Similar for math. So we saw an increase across many of our subgroups, including our Black African American, our Hispanic Latinx subgroups, our students with an IEP had an increase over the cohort before. And when we pull it apart, we can see where those increases are. So we see our Black males had an increase in the percent meeting one or more of the math benchmark, 64%. Our Latino males had an increase from 66% that met one of the more benchmarks to 79%. Our students with an IEP had an increase from 47% to 57% that met one or more of the math benchmarks. So in our district goals, we also have goal 2, a couple of the measures. Attendance, which we've already addressed, is in goal 2. Referrals is also in Goal 2. So we looked at this number of percent of students with 0 to 4 behavioral referrals that are across 4 years. That's an average of 1 referral a year. So 79% of all students had 4 or fewer behavioral referrals across 4 years. And we see, if we look at it just by race, ethnicity, we can see increases. So our Hispanic, Latinx student population saw an increase in the class and of fewer referrals in the class of 2018, as well as our students with an IEP. When we pull it apart a little more, we can see that our both Latina female and the males, Hispanic Latino males, both saw an increase or fewer behavioral referrals, a greater percent with fewer behavioral referrals, for example. And then one more measure we have that's in District Goal 2 is the percent that participated in 1 or more extracurricular activity. So over 3/4, the class of 2018 participated in at least 1 extracurricular activity. And this is in the report disaggregated by race and gender. We also have reported on graduation rate. There's more disaggregated details in the report, but here, if we want to look over trends, over 5-year trends, 91% of the class of 2018 graduated within 4 years. And if we look at a 5-year graduation rate, that would be the class of 2017 that just had a 5-year graduation. 94% of the class of 2017 graduated within 5 years. So that's a tick up. Every year it's been like a tick up a little bit. So now I just want to talk a little bit about the SAT, the college readiness benchmark versus the state's benchmark. So the state ISB has set a benchmark. There's college readiness benchmark, which represents 75% likelihood of achieving a C in the first semester of a credit-bearing college English language arts course, is 480. The state has taken this and set a higher benchmark of 540, and that is an indicator of meeting the Common Core standards. And so the test, which is nationwide, it's for college-bound seniors, we've been focusing on the College Board's benchmark, the 480. And here in this chart, I provide a comparison nationwide. So we have all of our students, 73% met that college readiness benchmark as identified by College Board of 480 compared to 70% nationwide. These are all of our juniors. These are all juniors as opposed to nationwide, which is college-bound seniors mostly. There's a handful of states that do it statewide, but there's some small states, Michigan, and I think Colorado. Otherwise, it's nationwide college-bound seniors typically. And then to give a little bit more information, we added the mean SAT score. So our ETHS class of 2018, their mean English language score was 560, higher than the nationwide mean of 533. And so you see it's similar for our African American Black population, same mean as the nationwide. Hispanic Latino within a point, and white students are higher than the mean score nationwide. Similar for the math. So the math, the same thing, 75% likelihood. The College Board benchmark of 530 is a 75% likelihood of achieving a C or better in the first semester of a credit-bearing college math course. The state set this benchmark at slightly higher at 540, but we can see that 57% of our students met that math SAT benchmark. And that's greater than the percent nationwide. And then when we look at the mean SAT math scores across the board, disaggregated by race, ethnicity, our mean SAT scores are higher than the nationwide mean SAT scores in math. Okay, so one more. So the report card, just can transition to the report card, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pete, who has a little bit more information. New this year is a summative designation. So I'm going to sort of explain this pie chart, which is from the state, of how they formed this formula to calculate the summative designation we are commendable, but I'm just gonna give you just a kind of a quick walk around this pie chart. So half of the greatest weight, and these are all weighted, they've got a formula that weights it, is a graduation rate. That's worth 50% of the formula, the calculation. The 4-year graduation rate is weighted higher than the 5-year, which is weighted higher than the 6-year. They also have added in this formula, so this is, the achievement report that I presented is by cohorts. The report card here and this designation is by last year, just students in the school last year. It's not of a cohort. There's different grades and these different metrics. So if I go around 9th grade on track, that's the percent of like 9th graders who met their on track indicator, and that's weighted 6.25%. Chronic absenteeism, which is new this year, weighted 7.5%. All students who miss 10% or more of school, that's excused, such as parental excused absences, and unexcused. I think the only thing that's excluded from this is students who are homebound hospitalized, and they say educational reasons like field trips, but we're still trying to pull this one apart. College and career readiness, everyone got full credit, for lack of a better word, for this one, which is what I was reporting in the achievement report. That will be similar to the college and career readiness. I don't know if they figure out exactly what the weights are in this, so that will be next year. The climate survey, which is the 5 essentials, right now all schools have full credit. Starting this year, we have to administer the 5 essentials every year, so next year that will be somehow figured into the calculation. The math proficiency and the English, 10% each, that's the SAT. These are of the ISB benchmarks, those higher cut scores, and it's the percent of students who met or exceeded those benchmarks. And then EL progress to proficiency, 5%. That's based on access scores, and it's a growth measure. It's growth, and it's across in multiple grades. Last year, we had about 160 students take the access test. Some of those were first-time students, so they probably were not counted in this progress to proficiency because it's a growth measure. They may be counted next year. So that's what goes into this summative designation, and what the calculations that go into determining how a school is exemplarily commendable, underperforming, or lowest performing. I'm going to add to Pete.
Carrie, what's the percentage of schools that are low performing?
Thank you. So now that I've told you this formula, they take this formula, they apply it to all schools, and then the bottom 5% are considered lowest performing, and that's the cut. And so they create an index. Every school gets an index score, and so the bottom 5%, that index score, they then use this formula for all subgroups within every school. So if any subgroup is below the index score for the lowest performing, that is how a school is determined to be underperforming. So for example, our EL population is small. It's above the cut point, but it's small enough that year to year, as they make changes, it could be close to the cut. It could just go below it, and then that would lend us towards underperforming. So that's how they're determining underperforming versus commendable. And then exemplar is the top 10% of all schools. So then everything in between underperforming and top 10% is commendable. Any more questions?
No, I would just like to say that this, as a metric, reveals as much as it conceals. I think it conceals quite a bit of ELA proficiency and math proficiency because the alpha weight here is graduation. It also tends to disproportionately affect schools that are more diverse and have smaller subgroups because the threshold for subgroup is very small, and the fewer students you have in a subgroup, the greater variability year to year. When you have 1,000 students in a subgroup, the variability is pretty tight. It doesn't change much year to year. It may fluctuate, but if you have a smaller number, say 100 kids, or what's the cutoff?
20, you have to have at least 20.
So if you
for
have
them to
20 in a
report.
cohort, you can imagine that, 4 or 5 kids make a huge difference. Every kid makes a huge difference, let me just be really clear, in terms of how we approach education. But on a metric like this, it really is interesting what gets rewarded and what gets sanctioned.
So just to go to that EL, English Language Learner Progress, to point out, if you're a community that embraces refugees, and so you have had quite a number of refugees come that are part of, let's say, that 100 students. After they've been here by their second year, they're included in that. But there may be, they are different stages of learning English language, but they still have to take the test and be included. And yet there are school districts all over the state of Illinois that don't have a single refugee. And so, again, by being a highly diverse school and embracing, lots of students in very diverse ways, it actually has an impact on each of these subgroups. And so it's interesting what they reward and what they, maybe penalize. It's just interesting.
So I had just a couple of additional distinctions, just as we transition to the report card in general, and then we'll go to questions. One distinction I think is noteworthy is that on the online report card, it lists our provider schools, our feeder schools, and it tells you which of those schools is commendable, which of those schools is, what their rankings are, what their designations are. So that's something new, and it's a little bit uncomfortable because they're not in our district. I'm used to seeing that in a unit district where it would say, the high school, and then, but we actually have some District 65 information on our school report card now, which is interesting. The other thing I want to say is I've dug into this. I've dug into the print copy as well. There's a copy under board action. But I just wanted to point out a couple things that we're still looking at and still digging into, because we don't believe that it's all perfect and aligned and cleaned up just yet. I mean, there was a rush to get it out. But I just wanted to just highlight just a couple things that I'm concerned about and we're looking into. One is our English language arts proficiency and math proficiency for students with IEPs. That's on page 7. Those, we're looking at 18.5% for ELA and 3.7% for math proficiency. And those are alarming, and, we have to dig in and really figure out what's happening there and how we can grow. However, as I was going through the document, it's helpful to look on page 19 of the same report card. And what I did was I kind of just added that. On page 19 of the same report card, you see a review of the state performance plan indicators for students with disabilities. It shows how ETHS students with IEPs performed on these specific indicators. Now, according to this table, within the same report card, you get markedly different information. On these metrics, if you look at on page 19, it'll say reading meets and exceeds. 47.8% of students with IEPs met or exceeded standards. On math, it's 62.2%. And for participation, it's up to 98%. So I went back and I looked at the previous year's report card just to see if the chart was in there. And lo and behold, there's the 2017. And you'll see in 2017, we were at 21.4 for reading, 19.4 in math, and 96.1 for participation. So in one part of the report card, it looks like we grew. And another part of the report card, it looks like we did not. It looks like we regressed. So this is just the kind of thing that we have to sort out. But either way, we seek to always do better in terms of our SAT scores, our SAT benchmarks for college readiness, and we'll certainly dig into that. Another area that was a little bit troubling, and I want to thank our friends at CASE for pointing this out, was our advanced placement data. It looks like we had 10 students, less than 10 students take AP classes who had IEPs. We're gonna double down and really look at that, and I'm gonna make that a part of our AP report, because that doesn't, on first blush, doesn't feel like an accurate
Yeah.
number. Just based on the amount of accommodation rooms that we run on testing day for advanced placement. But we're gonna look at that. We'll look at IEPs, and we'll also disaggregate by 504s on the AP report, which is still to come. But what I wanna say is this is not a fully formed product. It's a little bit difficult to interpret, and I look at these things and I go, okay, now what? And then I look someplace else and I go, well, that looks good, or looks, so many stories under one hood, and we're trying to figure out, brand new format for the most part. And just, those are the things that when you look at the school report card in your packet, those are things that came up for me, and I'd like to draw attention to. I believe that's, we're open for conversation. Report card or achievement report.
Yeah, it's a lot. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. It's a lot to take in. I appreciate the comments. And it's a work in progress. Jonathan?
Could you go back to the slide about attendance?
No, you can't. You want to drive that?
Actually, there were two of them. The one where it was broke, that's it. No,
No.
that one. No,
The attendance, I'm sorry.
There it
I'm
is.
sorry, class of 17, and with the one that had the
That's
larger
fine.
break, that one. Okay. So it seems to me that a comparison of two cohorts 1 year apart is not very helpful for the work that we do here. Because we're trying to measure progress toward our goals, and we've done all sorts of things over the last 5, 7, 10 years. We've engaged with the Pacific Educational Group. We've restructured the freshman year. We've had summits. We restructured the sophomore. We've had all of these changes over the last few. So it seems to me the information that we need is how has that changed things? How much progress have we made as a result of the various steps we've taken? And when we look at two cohorts that are 1 year apart, that doesn't really tell us very much. And I asked you to pull this one up because it illustrates the problem. If you look, there's a kind of a weird pattern. Among all female students, Black, African-American female, Hispanic, Latina female, white female, there are significant drops from the class of 2017 to the class of 2018 in the percent meeting 95% benchmark. Now, I know that's not a significant trend. I know that that's just two cohorts. It doesn't make any sense that for our white female students, 80% met 95% benchmarks, and the next year it's 54%. That's not a trend. That's not, and similarly, when you look at it the other way, if the numbers are better for the class of 2018, for the class of 2017, that's not a trend either. Right? That's not a significant trend. So what we need are numbers relevant to our goals that go back a significant number of years to take in the various changes that we've made. And I went sort of looking for that on my own, and the problem is that every year in our student achievement report, we ask different questions so that we don't, you can't take the 2012 student achievement report or the 2014 student achievement report and compare it to this. So I went to what was the next best thing, which is the school report card. And the school report card, although the measures changed, they consistently measure English proficiency and math proficiency. And I went back to 2011, which is before we implemented all of these various changes for our goals, principal among which is reducing the racial predictability of achievement. And if you go back to 2011 and compare it to 2018, the gap between the percentage of white students and the percentage of black students meeting or exceeding proficiency standards in 2018 is greater than it was in 2011. And the same thing for math. So I really think we have to have a longer-term set of data for perspective to see if what we're doing is working. Do you have any reaction to that?
I would love to have a consistent measure of proficiency too. Acknowledging that we went ACT,
Right.
which I thought was the gold standard, follow that through. As we went through, we saw cohort progress. Then we had 2 years of Park, where we don't know what we saw. I mean, honestly, it was given to freshmen over 2 years. And then we went back, and then we're on the SAT. What we really need to do is kind of look at, and this is one of the things that we're gonna work on, is that 75th percentile on the SAT, 75th percentile on the ACT, 3 or better on an AP exam, and look at that longitudinally, and we could go back and do that. In fact, that's the report that I used to do with the ACT, and now we can do that with the SAT. My hope is we can do that. Isolate the number, and then we'll be able to report that on a chart. And then that's the closest we can come, because we can reduce the achievement to percentiles, and we can look at the 75th percentile, which is what the Montgomery County Public Schools do to chart equity and excellence. I think that's probably the closest we can come, Jonathan, to that kind
But
of
at this point,
measure.
we don't have numbers to put up on a board that show that the gap is shrinking, do we?
We've changed how we measure the gap.
So you're saying we don't know at this point? I mean, because this doesn't,
This doesn't do that.
because the measures have changed? This isn't what we can use to even have that conversation.
Right. We've used advanced placement scores over the years to look at that. We've used the percentile of student scoring in the 75th percentile or higher on the ACT to do that. We have not used this. This is just the second year we've done this report this way.
Right.
To your point, to the multiple measure report. And it's, these are too early. We don't have the longitudinal data here to do that on tonight's report. That's correct.
I do want to lift up one of the inconsistencies that we're trying to mitigate. But it shows why when you look at the school report card, you're going to get different kinds of things. So from what we've been able to tell over the years, basically when the state talked about college readiness, they used the ACT established benchmark. Fair enough, makes sense. It's the ACT's test. They have a national database. They get information from all the colleges and universities about the predicting of a C or better freshman, and so their benchmark makes sense to us. Now we fast forward to the SAT in Illinois. And the reason we showed you the SAT national benchmark is because that's not what's on the school report card. Illinois made up its own. Now, while the SAT has the same kind of methodology, they have a national database, they have followed it for years, they have information from all the colleges and the universities, and so they have a predictability. What did Illinois do? None of that. Instead, it brought together some educators and had them decide, well, you know, on this question or on this item, it really ought to be at this, it really ought to be at that. They just literally picked their own numbers with no research database whatsoever. So the problem that you see on that school report card is there is no national research to support it. So what we're trying to show is that there is national research to support what we're trying to show, but if you're looking at that, you're looking at apples and oranges, not only because it's ACT and SAT, but because one of them followed the national norming and one of them didn't.
But we use apples and oranges too. Dr. Levy put up a slide that said, well, you should know that the numbers in this one column are actually from the ACT and the one from the SAT.
Right, well, right, because we're trying our thank you. That's the problem. I mean, we're trying to give some kind of a comparison here, but because of how this has changed over these last several years, I mean, you just give it your best shot. But we do think that what we have, you know, if we look at let's stick with that comparison, college benchmark, ACT, SAT. At least we have some hope that if this is what the ACT said and this is what the ACT said, that each of them has a reliable enough methodology, that we can at least get a general idea. Not the same metric, not identical assessments, but at least they're both based on national research and national norms.
But if we don't go back by some measure or other, however crude,
Well, we could-
5 or 7 years ago.
Well, we could do that.
How can we know if what we did 5 or 7 years ago made any difference?
I agree, I could agree. And remember, but I'm talking about the state report. I'm not talking about our reports. No, I'm saying if you're looking at the state report, it's truly apples and oranges. If you look at what we're trying to do, we're trying, and you do have that continuity, because we reported on the ACT all these years, as long as we had that data. Then we've got all these years in between that there is no data. Now, we've got the SAT, so we're trying. So no, I wouldn't invalidate that. I would say, given the best information we have, there is a methodology, but I would caution using the state report, because that's not even close to the same methodology.
Are you talking about the state report of this year or the state report of 7 years ago, or both?
Well, right now,
I'm just comparing the state within the state, not the state to our numbers, but the state's own numbers from 2011 to 2018.
okay, but 2018 is the SAT.
Right.
And so the state's numbers comparing the ACT would give us, and we've given that to the board every year. I mean, we have a 42-year history of the ACT. So right. But if you're going to try to make the leap from the state's SAT to the state's ACT, I would really caution against that, because they are two completely different methodologies. One's based on the national research and the national database, and one is based on a group of people in Illinois who picked some cutoff scores. But again, we went with the SAT norming so that we could at least get some kind of an indicator. I'm just cautioning you, don't try to use the school report card, because the state really did change their methodology.
Pat, can I ask a
Yes,
question for
yes.
Claire? Jonathan, what I thought I heard, and I was following you trying to, I think, get a similar response. You spoke about the state report, but you're also talking about what the school has done or implemented over the past several years, right?
Right,
You're talking
because-
about two different things.
Right, the reason I wanted to look back is because we have done several things.
To see what
in between,
changes
just
have
see-
affected
right,
the
right,
impact.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's two
Correct.
different things, and I'm with you there, because I'm trying to determine, like, yes, what small changes or major changes, but what changes have we done over the past year or past years that have impacted or affected the academic success of our students, right?
Right.
The targeted success. So I was just for clarity, because I was hearing one thing or hearing a couple of things, and I'm trying to be specific to what I heard too. But that's it.
No, and it's
That's
very
a good
valid.
question.
It
Yeah.
is.
But,
good
but I
question.
will remind you, you've seen the last 42 years of ACT, and the
Right.
last 9, all but for 1 year in the 1990s, have been the highest ACT scores ever, and we did disaggregate all of those as we went along. The
Yeah.
other thing you have seen, as Pete pointed out, advanced placement and the test
see
taking
'em in-
and the 3s and higher. So we have been presenting, and we will
Right.
continue to present that longitudinal look at those measures that are obviously, you know, reliable measures. I was only cautioning about the state report
Right.
and what
Right.
they did this year with
Right.
college readiness and the SAT.
Right. Okay, Pat.
So Pete, you said something a minute ago that made me think of something. So I think we were all kind of confused for the same reasons, and you gave us the reason why we're confused, because of a lot of different factors. But you said something a minute ago that maybe, and maybe you don't have an answer to the specifics, but I wonder if the reality is we could have other national initiatives next year, 5 years from now, that could change, the state could change, you know, that we we still want to know what we're doing and how it's, its effectiveness. And we certainly should use the data that we've been looking at through these two reports. But I wonder if there are some, I don't know, something you said suggested maybe there were some ways for us to look at ETHS specific and measure some of our work. And it might not be perfect, it might not tell us everything, but some snapshots to help us with that. Because I think that is what we all of us, including, and most importantly, all of you that do the work every day, want to know, how is this going and what,
Right. One of the things that I've done in the past, and I wasn't able to do it yet with the SAT this year, but one of the things we've done is we've looked at the four-year cohort, the four-year grad cohort. We've looked at ACT composite of 24 or higher, which is the 75th percentile ACT score. And I keep a chart on that, and I've shared that chart periodically every couple of years with the board. I would like to propose doing that disaggregated by race. I would like to propose doing that again with the SAT cut score of 75th percentile. That really is the college that's 75th percentile. That's a really high bar. It's higher than the state bar. But that's one of the things we've tracked in the past, and we've gone all the way back to 2011 and looked at that metric. We also do a 24 or higher, and then we do a score of 3 or higher on an AP exam. We disaggregate both of those by race. And we've reported that in the past, and I think we should, I would wholeheartedly support doing that going forward, because that keeps one level of consistency, right? The 3 or higher is consistent, we all agree, but the 75th percentile might be the best we can do.
Yeah.
In terms of a composite, in terms of and looking at the composite, not looking at the reading and math, but just looking at that composite score as a metric going forward. And when we've done that in the past, we have seen movement in our students trending in positive directions. There is some cohort strength, pieces that go into that, but it's a fairly it's a nice measure to look at, and I think it could help answer the question that we're all interested in is, what's the progress been since 2011? Kind of looking at that, looking at what a trend line would look like. And that does connect measures that normally don't speak to each other, but if we all agree that we're looking at the 75th percentile score for the SAT college bound, the national sample, and the 70th percentile on the ACT national sample, we stole that metric, right, from Montgomery County Public Schools, tend to work there, and they're still using it. So I think we ought to use that. It'll simplify things, and it'll answer this question. I can include that in my AP report, too.
And I want
because
to add one other
touches
thing.
on
This
that.
will not be longitudinal, but we are adopting the SAT suite of assessments. So we will start collecting 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So we'll follow each class as it enters the high school, and we will be able to follow their growth from the 9th to the 10th to the 11th grade. But we'll also start accumulating a wealth of data that we'll be able to chart every year. So that will accumulate fairly rapidly. Now, again, Pete's right. We can go back and do that, and that's a close enough comparison. And we've given you a lot of that over the years, but we can now do it with the SAT. But I think also within just even the coming years, giving this entire suite of SAT every single year, I think is going to inform us really in more detail than we probably ever had.
So that's something that we'll just be starting.
Yeah, Carrie, when do we intend to start?
So April 9th is the first time that all freshmen,
date.
sophomores, and juniors are required to take. So the freshmen will take the PSAT 8-9, sophomores will take the PSAT 10, juniors will do the SAT. We've administered the PSAT and MSQT to all juniors for the past 3 years. Last year, we administered the PSA 10 to sophomores. So we now, starting next year, we'll have some data as they're going through. So we have some, this year, grade 10 to 11. Next year, we'll have the current freshmen will have their PSAT 10, their sophomore. And then the following year, we'll have their 2 data points for the junior. So in the next year or two, we'll have that trend data across that, and we'll be able to pull that apart and make some meaning about that. So-
That's great, that's super. Okay, Gretchen.
Thanks. Just ditto the folks who have already asked for more information. It's, I think, very consistent with the kind of thing we were asking for at the joint school board meeting. You know, we need to be able to see data over time. If our role as a board is to establish policy and look at trends over time and figure out how, at a very high level, we can propose, suggest, and support changes to change those trends, we actually have to see the data over time to be able to make that call. So I can't reiterate how important it is to get that done, to make it very clear, not just to the board, but I think also to the public. And I think we can certainly nitpick and complain about how the state has structured the state report card. But there's actually a lot of good stuff there too, not the least of which is I'm actually pretty impressed with how it's presented online, the report card. And I would urge everybody to take a look at the online report card because it's extraordinarily easy to navigate. The graphics are really good. You can plug in any number of comparison schools. You can either choose your comparison schools or you can choose comparison by demographics. So if you want to find a school that looks like ETHS, you can try and select it that way, and you can line us up and see how it works. So, you know, and I think it is relevant and important for people to compare ETHS to other schools entirely. And it's similarly important for us to compare ourselves to years previous within our own institution. So, and this report card allows you to do, over time it'll allow us to compare ourselves with years previous, but right now it allows us to compare outside the school. And in fact, I think in some of these sections, and I just want to highlight, and there's a couple in particular that I want to get your input on that you haven't specifically addressed here. So for example, I think there's a scatter plot section on the school report card under the performance section. And it's really interesting because on the scatter plot, you can see all the schools in Illinois and the little dot, which represents ETHS. And once you get that sort of visual, you can really appreciate that we look pretty good in, you know, even when we isolate particular subgroups. And I think sometimes it's easy for people to criticize ETHS and what we do because sometimes we take criticism from parents, students, of course, who are very close to what's going on here. And we as board members can criticize as well. And I think occasionally it's good to step back from the, you know, 30,000-foot point of view, realize that in this large country of ours, in the state of Illinois, we are really at the top of the game. And I just am going to toss that out there. There's always room for improvement, but I think some of the graphics on this report card make that crystal clear. And that scatter plot section, I think, is one place that highlights that when you see bazillion little dots and we kind of bubble up to the top. Even against schools, by the way, that are not nearly as diverse as ours. So for example, we can plot, you know, on those scatter plots, you can see our black student performance exceeding the performance of students in 100% white schools, or, you know, 90-some% white schools. You know, and I get that our black students aren't where we want them to be, but, you know, this does shed a little light on that. But I want to ask you, on the other hand, there are certainly areas where we need to do some work. And one that jumped out at me was community college remediation. That's a section of student performance. And we didn't talk about it, but I think it's important to talk about it because so many of our students do go to community college, for one thing. And also because there's a lot of work underway in the state of Illinois. Some of that work EdRed has been involved in to get more joint dual credit courses offered within high schools. And I wonder if you can address the fact that, you know, we often like to boast that we've beat the state numbers, you know, academic performance numbers that were above the state average. Well, on the remediation rates in community college, we're actually not.
Yeah, I can answer that.
Yeah.
Every community college has a different standard for remediation, number one, which is
Okay.
important to keep in mind.
Good to know.
Number two, you know, we've been working on this. This is no surprise if we've been around the table. We've been working on the remediation piece, particularly for mathematics. One of the things that happens in terms of background is that at community college, you end up in remedial coursework, otherwise known as O-level, which means non-credit bearing coursework. You get stuck in a cycle and you never make it out. One of the things we've done in the last 2 years is we've started offering O-level courses here at ETHS so that you can enter Oakton taking credit-bearing mathematics courses. If you pass that class here, it's a module-based curriculum that we share with Oakton Community College. We also offer the first level credit-bearing course that Oakton has. We also offer that here. It's Math 110. And then beyond that, we offer 3 early pathway courses here. So the hope is that as those courses mature and as we get better and better at putting kids into them who, you know, recruiting kids into them who will go off to community college, that we will see those remediation rates decline. But I think that's a bar for us. I would rather compare us to where we are on that and bring that down than try to compare to the state, which is, again, every community college has a different measure of what is
But the good thing
remediable.
is the state is asking us to look at this, and we weren't particularly reporting out on this previously. So now that, you know, we're kind of required to look at it, I think,
It's gonna
you know,
help.
we can build out our reporting along the lines of what I think everybody at the table is supporting, so we can
Absolutely.
keep track of it, and, you know, whereas we may not have otherwise. I just want to return again to the, you know, the aspects of this report card, which I think can be enlightening for us. The other one I meant to highlight was there's a section called Achievement Gap here, and I skipped over that because I got distracted by the scatter plots. But the Achievement Gap section is really interesting and and highlights an area of obvious work that we need to do, right? And in a very visual way, again, because it shows the park piece is irrelevant, but on the SAT, you can click a box for black, white achievement gap. You can do low income versus non-low income. You can do Hispanic, white, disabilities, non-IEP. And you can see these kind of yawning gaps, right? And I think that information will be far more useful over time because, as Jonathan has pointed out, you know, these 2 years that we have displayed here don't really tell the story. This came up at our joint board meeting as well because we don't have reporting over time. You know, and if you get too hung up on it, you might say, gosh, from year to year, it's like arguably worse if you're just using those 2 comparison points. But the visual is important, and I think it's a good takeaway, and I like how they show it here. And you can even hover your mouse, you know, and they give you the exact numbers if you can't figure it out from their bar graphs. I think we should maybe, I would love for our reporting out to get a little more visually
Sure,
appealing, accessible.
sure.
And I think would help for, I think we talked about this also at various other board meetings, I've raised it. I think it would be helpful for all of us, not just the board, but for
You know,
the
what's-
public too.
I completely agree. I mean, when I look at the chart, one of the things that jumps out to me, and again, I encourage everybody to do this at home, The gap between white students at ETHS and white students in the state is a 36-point gap. That's interesting, right? You say, that's the white gap from ETHS to other, to the state, and then you look within ETHS and you see other gaps as well. But it's actually visually, it's an excellent way to kind of give you the context of where we are in terms of the state, but also give you the,
Yeah.
give in terms of the context of ETHS. So I
And
like the way it
And to
does.
understand that, obviously, we're doing some good things for some of our students. And I think it's easy to forget that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have these other pieces where we're struggling. And you can do that, by the way, and compare any subgroup of our students with any other subgroup of students across the North Shore, into the western suburbs, suburban Cook County in general. And, I think many of our students are doing really, really, but they're at the top of the game by those, as compared to some of those other districts. But we have other students, and principally students of color, students with disabilities, English language learners who are not where they could or should be.
And to affirm what you're saying, Ms. Livingston, because I think you're really bringing up important points, and thank you. The other thing that it does, for example, we know that Oakton Community College has had a much higher remediation requirement than most community colleges, the way they do it. But what it has done, it has not only highlighted where we want to put a focus, but it's highlighted for Oakton to question why does, why do their requirements lead to more remediation? And so I'll really give credit that they're really now examining this deeply, and as a result, I think we'll see, some system work on this. The same with that achievement gap. Now we can look at all of our feeder schools, and we can actually look, what was the gap of the students when they arrived here? And what's happening once they get here, because they don't just, they don't drop in here without a real history. And so again, what you're saying is, so now we got an idea of what's occurring with Oakton. We also have an idea what has occurred with the students before they got here, and what is the gap when they enter ETHS.
Which is also why it's a really good thing that both our District 65 and Oakton, among many others, are involved in the Cradle to Career effort, where, I've been on the Prepared for Adult Life subgroup for 5+ years, and this is exactly the kind of stuff we have been talking about for all that time, and, we, again, still have work to do. It's ongoing.
Yeah, but thank you.
Jude.
So, my thought is the same as whenever we get ready to look at some numbers. It's the whole predictability factor, which I know is, we all know is foundation for our work. This is what is driving us, the equity work and everything. Of course, every time we look at the numbers, I'm sure to find white students outperforming, white and Asian students outperforming all the other students. African-American males are going to be underperforming all of the students. So that's predictable to me. So what I would like to see, and this may, in the grand scope of the longitudinal study, this may be a part of the work, but in my mind, when I see, and it's pretty consistent, the numbers, they don't fluctuate that much. Like, for example, the numbers for the white students, they don't fluctuate that much from year to year, and they're consistently white and Asian students outperforming other groups of students. I would really love to see our standard of measurement, or one of the standards of measurement that we look at, is from year to year, are the groups that are being outperformed, like the African-American males, are they improving outcomes at a greater rate than the other groups? Because in my mind, that's the only way you ever really solve the issue that you set out to resolve in the first place. The predictability of how students are going to perform based on their race and other categories. And I just don't hear us talk enough about that, and I think, you know, with Jonathan and the comments that you made, it makes every bit of sense. Now, one thing that is consistent, no matter what measurements we're using, if we're using the College Board benchmarks or the state benchmarks, that these categories or groups are going to fall where they typically do in terms of outcomes. And, you know, I'm just putting that out there. It's like, we know what we're going to see every time we look at the numbers. Are we measuring the rate of improvement every year? Like, are they making ground, these groups that are underperforming? Yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to put out there, and just your sense of how we're coming along with that.
You know, and I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm right, because we can pretty much, I mean, predict.
Yeah.
The predictability. So I'm also wondering what other factors, because I know we're doing a lot and we have to, because there isn't a quick fix. If it was, we could bottle it and sell it and we would be, you know, everyone's prayers or answers. But there are so many different factors that play into why a student, especially, so let's highlight the black male student, is underperforming. And some of those factors can be addressed inside this building. This is, you know, I think I've said this even prior to being on this board, that many factors require community engagement. And so again, I totally support the initiatives that we're trying, because we have to, without a doubt, try our best to figure out what it is. It's like unpeeling an onion. I mean, it's complicated. And, but we can control what we can control here, and so what does that look like? Like, how do we know, without a doubt, that what we're doing is supporting eliminating that gap or addressing the gap, but it can't be done, if I'm making sense, in isolation, thinking that we're gonna fix it between the time the bell rings. You know, I mean, there's so much more to it, as you know, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the totality of that and what does it look like from our perspective? Because I don't know, I'm stumped. You know, I know that we get reports and we can see that it's also creating a sense of welcoming for students that didn't have that experience 15 years ago, 11 years ago. Things that we're doing, we're also trying to allow access to students and experiences that they didn't experience 11, 15 years ago. So there are all these different things that we're trying to do to get at the achievement of our students, or increasing the achievement, especially with certain subgroups. And it's complicated in my head in terms of how we do this, how we shift this. Because it's not a, you know, it's not a boat. It's like a ship, it's a tank. It's, you know, it's complicated, and I don't know how to get at it. So,
So I actually appreciate your comments, both of you. I think that we cannot have these conversations in isolation, and we can't compartmentalize these conversations and just talk about numbers as if these other factors don't exist or impact these numbers. We've been talking about this for years, and we know that this is complicated, and we know that this has been in place for decades, for hundreds of years, and we know that there are factors big, way outside of our control that we are all dealing with. This is education, these disparities are present in healthcare, in wealth, in just every institution that we can think of. They're present. So here we are working in our community to try to impact what we can, and I think it's important that we do it. But when we hear these numbers, you know, I see these numbers, and really it doesn't matter. And I want to see what you come up with. I want to see a full report, Dr. Bavis, but I can predict what that report's going to look like. I can predict what subgroup's going to be at the bottom. And actually, the numbers that we have in front of us really demonstrates that same pattern. I mean, we've got it here. So we're asking for a look at several years. I think that will be helpful. But then I just want us to remember that there are all these other factors that we've been talking about that we know. And we can't just look at this in isolation and just look at numbers and say our work is, we're either successful or we're not, because that's setting us up, and I'm not gonna let that happen. There's too much going on, and we know that we know the world we live in, we know the climate we live in, and we can't pretend like it's not impacting our students and actually our staff. We all live in the same environment, in the same world. So, other comments?
Can I just add a couple of little short things? I wanted to pick up on what Jude was saying about growth and the persistence of the gap. And I really hope that as we're looking at measures, we're focusing on proficiency. And I think that there can be times when we succeed in moving kids up from the middle to the top, but not so much from the bottom to the middle. And I think that's the nub of the heart of the gap. I mean, it all contributes, but I think that it's really important that the measures that we look at, I'm kind of skeptical, for example, of AP participation as a measure for this. I mean, more AP participation is great. It's a good thing, and it's much better than less AP participation, but I don't think it necessarily addresses all of the issues that contribute to the gap. The other thing I wanted to mention was to pick up on what Dr. Bavis said about how the big gap between white students at ETHS and white students statewide. What's interesting is you have a similar gap between black students at ETHS and black students statewide, Latinx students at ETHS, Latinx students at statewide, Asian students, and so forth. That's why I'm really concerned, and I hope we will take a closer look at these IEP numbers. Because for all of those other categories, and remember, we've agreed to fight the predictability of achievement in all of these characteristics, and all of those other ones we're doing, and the state is a low bar. Being as good as the state of Illinois, that's pretty bad. But in all of those other categories, all of our groups, other student groups, are higher than the state average, and at least on the surface, it looks like the numbers here suggest that our IEP students are below the state performance measure, and that's disturbing.
Yeah, we have to look at that. Absolutely. Agreed.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time and the reports. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Davis, you're gonna just walk and make a few changes and then come back?
Change your tie.
Don't go far, yeah, right. Put on a different hat.
All right, I'm going to try to make up some time here. New courses and course changes. These are detailed in your packet. I actually changed the form this year. I wanted to have more information provided for new courses, so it's almost like a mini syllabus when you see a new course. Just a reminder, we follow what's called the RAPID process. It's outlined in the slide. It's also outlined in the memo. Teachers with department chairs develop initial recommendations. Department chairs endorse the course proposals. Department chairs, associate principal of instruction and literacy, review the new course proposals to provide a school-wide perspective. The CFO reviews new course proposals for financial implications. Thank you, Mary Rodino. I sign off an agreement to move course proposals forward to the board at that point. If approved by the Board of Education, teachers with department chairs develop curriculum and assessments. We get input along the way from curriculum forum, teachers, department chairs, other administrators, and the Board of Education decides every December when these go to a vote. So I'll cut to the chase. Here are the new courses. CTE has 3 new courses proposed: Advanced Fashion, Cybersecurity, and Engineering Design and Development. All of those are capstone courses. Cybersecurity, I'm assured by our teacher that this does not pose a risk to ETHS cybersecurity. In fact, ethics and cybersecurity is one of the actual topics outlined in the course syllabi. Engineering Design and Development is a capstone course for our Project Lead the Way engineering sequence. This is a very exciting course. This is a course where students will be able to use our advanced manufacturing lab and our engineering labs to fabricate, to solve real-world problems, fabricate, prototype, and then ultimately present to a team of industry folks their ideas. It really is incredible. It's at other districts have it, and it's the next logical step to have that kind of capstone here at ETHS. So those are our CTE new offerings. Fine Arts, we have Discovering Success Through Music and students taking awe-inspiring roads to success. We're looking to formalize these courses. Right now, one, Discovering Success Through Music functions as a FASH for students, a 5-day-a-week FASH. We've talked about this before when we talked about the Black Male Achievement report. And also the next step for sophomores is students taking awe-inspiring roads to success, which again is it's a blend of music education, brain development, reading, literacy, and well-being curriculum. And finally, we're going to have a fine arts special education ensemble called the Wild Kit Ensemble, or WE for short. In English, we're looking to revise our 3 English 2H course to make that a pathway to honors course in alignment with 9th and 10th grade, acknowledging, of course, that nearly 1/2 of all of our juniors take AP language and composition. PE, we have something called sports-specific training. This would be for varsity and elite athletes at ETHS. And what they would be able to do is we would have they would get sports-specific workouts. It would be a PE course where they would get sports-specific workouts. So if you're on the football team, you'd get, and you're a wide receiver, you would get a workout tailored to that position. It would be both during season and off season. The goal of which is to get to increase fitness, obviously, to decrease injuries, to improve strength and conditioning for our athletes. I'm not going to make any promise around it improving records, but my hope is that it improves, it reduces the amount of injuries because these are sport-specific workouts. And they would be in tight communication, so on game day they may do meditation and light stretching. Post-game, the whole thing is developed, it's laid out. It's at many of the surrounding districts have it, and it is a fantastic opportunity that we're looking to have right here at ETHS. And finally, we have a new summer school course, STEM in Sports. This takes the place of, we have a, the title is very boring. We have a biology course that's sort of a bridge to one bio, that's it. So this is a lot more exciting than that. They're gonna look at actually sports-specific science. So everything from the physics of throwing a ball to the exit velocity when you hit a ball with a baseball bat and things of that nature. Very hands-on, very, very exciting summer school course. And, oh, went too far. So that's an outline. I didn't include all of the course revisions. There are a lot of course revisions that are just cleanup at this point. They're outlined in the packet, and I believe they're outlined in the memo as well. Questions, comments?
You may know right where I'm going with this question, but you know that course we have called Contemporary Adult Life?
Be a great summer project.
Yeah, I don't know what comes first. I mean, do you do, reading this, do you do the summer project, or do you do the course recommendation and then do the summer work, or I don't know. I just don't want this to get lost, Pete.
Right. No,
And
I
I was
anticipated.
reminded when this, when
I
this popped
anticipated
into
this
our
question.
packet again.
Yeah, we're gonna do a comprehensive summer project. We've also looked at the consumer ed portion.
Well, yeah, that's,
Yeah,
I mean,
and-
it's all related,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
we've met, we did a curriculum working day 2 weeks ago on it
Right.
with the team, and we'll continue to, we'll have a couple more of those scheduled.
Great.
Putting it all on the table, and we're gonna have a revamped course. I couldn't get the title changed, but, you know, we're working on
Oh,
that.
come on. That can't be hard. Who's
Yeah, we
stuck
have
on
ownership,
that?
yeah, we have ownership. It'll be
Really,
okay.
just have a contest
We'll
where
get it
students can
exciting.
come up with something. I mean,
Maybe
you came
that'll
up with
be-
this very creative, what's it called, STARS?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
come on.
Yeah, we can get them
People
to-
are thinking about this.
People are,
They can-
that's
That
fine
is
arts.
very
We need to
Yeah,
teach it
this
out of the
isn't
fine
rocket
arts
science.
department, I think.
Right,
To get
okay.
a creative title.
I'm
but-
glad you're on it, because
Yeah.
really, I think, I mean, this is going back to about 4 student school board reps before Phoebe when this first came up, and I'm glad we're jumping on it, because I think financial literacy is something, again, to go back to, I don't mean to tout cradle to career all night long, but, you know, if we want to produce productive young people in our society, I think this financial literacy is certainly a piece of it. So, thank you.
Phoebe?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the packet, and it says that one of the revised changes was for AP Art History.
Yep.
And it says Fine Arts / History, so my question is that saying that AP Art History is gonna become a history credit?
Can be, it's up to the student. The student have to declare that, but yeah, that's the goal.
Okay, cool.
It also means they could eventually, if it was overprescribed by you know, if it became super popular, we could have an art history teacher potentially, we'd have a history teacher potentially teach it. So it means 2 things.
Great courses. Other questions?
A question, the engineering design and development course, that's for 12th graders only?
Yeah, it's a capstone, so you would take 1 or 2 engineering courses along the way, and then be eligible to take that capstone. I think you could petition to get in there if you were a junior, but right now we're setting that aside for seniors.
So we're, Metamedia is doing this with middle schoolers right now.
So they would go into the, into our Project Lead the Way engineering program, where they would get, it would augment what's happening at Metamedia. You would get familiarity with the equipment we have in our labs. You would get continued development of the design thinking process along the way, familiarity with AutoCAD and different design software packages, and then it would manifest itself in this capstone.
Like that, okay.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions about 3 English.
Sure.
So currently, what is there, 3 English 1, 3, no, there's 3 English 2 and 3 English.
3
H.
2, 3 English honors, and then
The
our
APs. Yeah, right.
juggernaut AP course.
Okay. So will 3, in the pathway to honors in the new 3 English 2, will that pathway be portfolios like sophomore year, or the assessments like
I'm
in
pushing
freshman year?
at this point, I'm pushing portfolios.
good.
In fact, as we, portfolios are, one of the things, we met with some English teachers and, who had done the sophomore
Right.
portfolios, and they talked about what an amazing resource it would be, right? To be a junior teacher and be able to say, open up your portfolio from last year, pull up your da-da-da-da-da assignment, and let's continue working on that. So there, it creates a natural bridge. So yes, Jonathan, absolutely.
And so, was 3 English H the last straight honors humanities
Standalone
class
in-
in the building?
No, not in the building, in the English program.
In English, in humanities, in English or history?
Yes.
Yes.
Humanity, I mean, on the history side, we haven't had a
Right.
straight history
Right,
course
right,
for
right.
30 years, but yeah.
So as of next year, there will be no more straight honors humanities courses at ETHS, right?
Right. We'll have pathway to honors
Right,
courses
right.
or advanced placement
But not
courses.
the-
Correct.
And I'm just putting this out here, and I don't at all expect you to answer this question now. But having eliminated straight honors classes from one entire aspect of the school's coursework, that is the humanities, how do we reconcile that with maintaining straight honors in math and science? Now, I'm just putting that out there. It seems to me, having now totally ended the concept of straight honors in humanities, that it's kind of an odd thing.
Thank you.
The next frontier.
To be continued. All right,
So those are the proposals, and we will have a meeting in December where
Right.
we will vote on
vote
those.
on this, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you very much. All right. So moving right along, we are at the opening of school report. And there's Dr. Levy. Okay.
Short and sweet too. So, opening of school, our official enrollment as of September 30th every year. So this year, our total school enrollment is up to 3,613. That was the official number as of September 30th. And I feel like I have the same headline for the past few years. Total enrollment is the highest in over 30 years. So again, this year is higher than last year, which was a record number.
And the highest in what, at least 30 years?
At least 30 years. I can't go past 30 years. That's as far back as I can go in our data and the reports that I can access. So this one is just to look at enrollment proportion by race ethnicity, just a trend over 5 years proportion. So while we see the proportion of our Hispanic Latino has been raising up a little bit, and our proportion of white, our proportion has been ticking up slightly over the past 5 years. Our proportion of Black African American has just been decreasing slightly. So these are really small adjustments or changes over time. And then another highlight, our special ed enrollment, pretty similar for the past 5 years, up or down a handful of students, but pretty steadily. It's pretty even for the last few years. And then our bilingual enrollment, that's doubled. Last year it doubled in 5 years, so it's still more than twice what it was in 5 years. Those are just the highlights, the details, all disaggregated by grade and race, ethnicity, gender are in the official report. Do we have any questions? This is always the shortest one I give you
I
every
know
year.
it is, it's always.
It's my favorite.
And I'll just say, thank you, parents, keep those children coming.
Yeah, that's right. Numbers are up. Okay. Questions? No questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So moving right along, we're at our capital improvements program. Okay. Hear about some great work coming.
Hello, board. It's not too late. But this is only my first presentation. So.
Sure.
Well, I just wanted to bring to you some information regarding our capital projects. I hope you've all had a chance to see entrance 3. We're not quite done. There's still a little punch list, but I think the majority of the work has been done. And if you haven't been through the entryway, I do encourage you to do so. I think we've gotten positive reviews from the students as well as families and visitors and parents. And so that was our biggest accomplishment from this year, and we'll talk just a little bit about that and other projects in the presentation. So we're going to talk about a little background, just review what the capital improvements program is, talk about completed projects, and then talk about what we're looking forward to doing next summer and beyond. This is our annual update of what we consider a 5-year CIP plan, construction or capital improvement program. But one of those 5 years is usually a recap of what we've just finished. We consider capital improvements are things that are valued at over $25,000. And as you know, we have over 1.2 million square feet of building and 60+ acres of campus. It's an old picture, but it always works just to show you. I mean, that's a lot of roofs and fields and all kinds of stuff. So it's a big monster to tackle every year. We have multiple funding sources, as you know. Our biggest funding source is through GO, or general obligation bonds, which are pledged by the general revenues of the district. We are looking into some things in the future, which are called debt certificates. They don't go out quite as long as bonds, so you get a better deal. We've used things called qualified zone academy bonds in the past, which I always remember that Mark commented, it was basically free money. We pay about 0.25% of interest on it, and he said, can we get more of that? But we couldn't. So we did do as much as we could with that. That was back in 2011, I think. We also have some TIF dollars, and I want to talk to you about that. And then every year we have some foundation donations where they fundraise for some of our capital projects. Again, background, as you know, same thing every year. We're unable to really fund all the capital needs. On our financial statements, our depreciation of assets in this building are about $3 million annually. So if we want to stay ahead of that, we should be spending about $4 million, something over 3 at least, on capital annually. But in general, if you look at it over 5 to 10 year average, we're spending between 2 and 3 million. Sorry for the typo. I thought I fixed it. It's not dent service, it's debt service. I swear I fixed it after executive session. The debt service levy is limited by legal caps, as you all know. So our 5-year CIP plan, which was in the packet, has an estimated cost of about $32.6 million. That was the other fix I made, but I must have saved the wrong version. Not $32.6, it is $32.6 million. The approval tonight would be for 1 year, or the approval by the board would be for 1 year of the plan with estimates for the future years. So we have some categories that we break the projects down into, kind of boring overall, but improvements, mechanical, toilets, roofs, masonry, windows, asbestos, and education is really where we classify kind of those, you know, the more fun projects, the chem phys labs, the entrance, you know, things that improve the life of the students in the building. The rest of the stuff is just because we have to do it. So again, a recap of what we've done recently, entrance 3, which includes a new elevator and restrooms. We're working out some of the final issues on the elevator. It is in, it is there, but we are at the mercy of the elevator inspectors, so we are patiently waiting, sometimes not so patiently. The chem phys labs, which were quite an accomplishment, I would say, to finish in 1 summer. That was sponsored by a major donor through the foundation, so we really wanted to try and get that all done. We finally, I'm not sure if the board is aware, but we finally have replaced some of the windows on the north side of the school. On the Dodge Avenue side, the first floor, like where the communications office, the AIT offices, those are new windows. It's a really long, drawn-out process to have window mock-ups and things, and that will be a 2-year project that we did commit to last year. We're still working on the Hartree Special Ed Public Day School. Construction's coming along. I'm gonna go visit that later this week with our HR, chief HR officer, so that she can get a feel for the space, so that we can start talking about what will happen in that space next year. Been meeting with Dr. Walls in special ed, and so a lot of us are coming together to think about how that space will look when it's open. And we also did a couple major projects in the pool area this summer. We replaced the old filtration system and did a big project on the roof. So looking forward, we've been talking about locker rooms for a while. It's a huge thing to tackle. It's multiple spaces. They're very old. They don't work well. Everything from, sight lines to what works for students of today versus what worked for students, 50, 60 years ago. We have to replace the football turf. It's now 11 years old. It had a 10-year life, so by the time we replace it, we'll be starting into the 12th year if we didn't replace it then. It's held up well, but it's time. We have a large need for auditorium lighting and sound. It would be a multi-year project as well. The sound is bad in there, as most of you have heard. The lighting is getting to a point where we have dimmers and things, and a lot of the outlets are starting to fail, and so we can't use many of the lighting receptacles that are in there. I don't know that it's ever been redone in the 50, 60-year history of the auditorium. We do need to continue with the window project in the building. We do have leaks when it rains, and it requires constant monitoring of certain areas because the water gets dangerous when it comes into student walkway areas. And we do need to replace our very old PA system and somehow tie it in. Well, there are a few ways to do it, but tie it into our voice over IP phone system for emergency announcements. In going a little bit further down the road, we're going to need to continue to tackle the window project. I don't even know how many windows are in this place, but it's a lot. They're not cheap. The outdoor facilities are going to need to be maintained and upgraded, including track and turf, et cetera. And then the multi-year projects, specifically the auditorium project, sound and light, and locker rooms will need to be, we just couldn't afford to do them in 1 year, even if we could figure out how to do it in 2.5 months. We also have an issue with the auditorium HVAC system. Once I tell you this, you'll probably always think of it when you're in there. There are 2 temperature levels in there, off and cold. So, people always ask, can you turn down the air? Can you turn it up? No, it's off or cold. So bring a coat or bring a fan, I guess, I don't know. We did look into doing this last summer. It came back a lot more expensive. We had it as an alternate bid on our construction projects. It came back a lot more than we had anticipated, and it's probably going to be close to $600,000 for that. We're trying to reevaluate to see if we can do anything other than a full-blown replacement, so we'll have some discussions over that in the next year or so. So the plan, the tentative plan, if the board is in agreement, would be to utilize remaining bond funds from 2018. If you remember, we did a bond issuance of $6 million in the spring of 2018. A good portion of that was allocated towards the big projects that we did last summer that we talked about. We are also always utilizing the foundation contributions. They're about $500,000 every year. I would like to talk to you about a one-time use of working cash funds, which I'll get to in a second. The good news, the really good news, is that we did, I think I have a slide on this coming up, but the city of Evanston has officially filed paperwork to close the big Washington National TIF. We weren't sure exactly when that would come, and we also weren't sure what the declaration dates would do as far as our tax levy this December that the board will be approving next month. The good news is they are closing that out with an effective date that should, by everything we've been told, affect our levy, which we'll do next month, and start receiving in calendar year 2019. So what happens in the spring is that we just get an estimate of previous year's taxes, but then in the fall, which typically taxes are due August 1st in Cook County, so in the fall, we will start receiving a much larger, to me, much larger amount of property taxes by way of that TIF district falling off. We have estimated that to be about $1.5 million a year once we start getting the full amounts. And so you'll see in the capital plan that we've presented that we are proposing, at least in the short term, to try and use that money for the big ticket capital improvements that are really needed within the district. Also, not quite as much money, but still important, as every year we plan to have a sale of our geometry and construction house. And I'm happy to let you know that there is a tentative contract signed on our Emerson house. We had a few little hiccups in the construction because of some plumbing connections from the street. But there is a contract pending, and I'm hoping that that closing will take place before the end of December. And then that will leave us with the house on Gray, which was just moved in June. And so I feel like we've finally moved into a cycle of finishing a house, selling it. We're not stockpiling like we were for a couple of years when we owned Dodge and Dewey at the same time. So we feel like we're on a much better track of finishing a house, selling it, and because the costs of building the house come out of the capital plan, we try to always replenish that money with the proceeds of the house. So I do want to talk about the one-time use of working cash. So I'll talk about, I don't have a separate slide on that. So the district has working cash funds that are over, off the top of my head, $6 million. I think it's 6.2, 6.3. The money has been in place since long before I came, and I've been here about 12 years. It is designed to sit. It's designed to allow districts to make sure that they have enough money in some of those peak and valley revenue times. Some districts do take it out often to use it. There are no stipulations on how and when it can be spent. We certainly have healthy cash reserves otherwise, but I started asking when we started seeing what the projects were adding up to as far as our needs. And so I started asking our auditors and our bond advisors about presenting to the board for a one-time use of those working cash funds. This is not unlike when we have done some transfers from our operations fund as fund balances have accumulated in there. I think about 5 or 6 years ago we transferred, I want to say $5 million. And then we also did a $1.3 million transfer more recently. So as our fund balances are healthy, we've done that. We don't want to always take from the operations and maintenance fund, and our fiscal 18 financials are not quite finished yet. We just took money from there, from the operations fund last year. So I did speak to all of these experts in the field about, you know, what does anything happen if we use one-time use of working cash funds? There are some formulas that are important for districts, and even using $2 million, all of our formulas of what we should maintain in that fund are still above what those requirements are. So rather than trying to take on additional debt, you know that we're subject to tax caps, I am presenting a one-time use of working cash funds. If you look at the capital plan, you know, there are some really big ticket items. Like I said, the football field, the locker rooms. We don't even really know what $1 million in locker rooms can get us for the first year. We're still in that exploratory phase. We've just met and tried to figure out what the needs are. You know, do you really need 30 showers when students don't typically take showers in a locker room? So there are, if you look at the plan, there are some really big ticket items. And unfortunately, if we don't utilize kind of a combination of financing, we really will have to put some very critical projects on hold. So I would prefer not to do that if the board is okay with that.
And Mary emphasizes again, that would be 2 of the 6 million. We would still have 4 million in working cash, well above the recommended requirements. And this would be a one-time expenditure, so we wouldn't be using it to incur ongoing expenses.
Correct. And it's not the kind of thing that we would come back next year and say, oh, we need more.
Yeah.
We really have thought about how we might cover some of these expenses going forward. And every year at this time, we sit down with probably $8 million in needs and about $3 million in money. And so when you look at some of those needs this year, I mean, the board's been talking about locker rooms, Eric's been talking about locker rooms for quite a while. But entrance 3 was also really a big priority, and it's just hard. I mean, it's hard to whittle 8 million down to 3. You can see how it looks in those future years on the plan, because they're a couple years out where we're back at, you know, a $9 million need or something and $3 million in money. And I think we've been really successful in meeting with all the parties involved and saying, oh, can this wait? You know, is it urgent? And so we finally got to a point where windows just really couldn't wait anymore. And so we're trying to kind of have that balance of not committing to too many projects, but making sure that we have a balance of things that just really need to get done, and then the things that do improve student life around the building, like a chem phys lab or an entrance 3. But yes, we have double checked the levels of the working cash fund. Like I said, we've not touched it in the 12 years. I went back and looked just to make sure there was something that I wasn't even aware of. And we've not touched it in at least 12 years. And I'm not saying, I mean, it's not something we have to do. Certainly we could scale back the projects again. But I think when you're doing multiple large projects for multiple years in a row, I think it makes sense and it's completely appropriate. The good news is, going forward, we will have that TIF money to kind of help boost our budget, at least for a while, unless something comes down from the state, say on, you know, pension contributions. But in the meantime, we can make some headway on some of these things, because there have been years where we've only spent $2.5 million, and that's not even keeping up with the way things depreciate around here. So I think that's all I have, and if there's any questions or any specific projects that the board would like to talk about, I'd be happy to take questions.
I just need to make a quick announcement. There is a lights are on in a silver SUV Q578348 license plate. If that's anybody's in here, just want to make an announcement. Silver
Thanks,
SUV.
Pete.
Thanks. Okay, thank you
I
for
just had
that.
a quick question.
Yes.
So Mary, is there, I know you've never touched the money, so maybe there aren't any rules or anything, but is that something you would pay back eventually, or put some of that money back? I'm just curious if there's
I think it's-
guidelines or anything around that.
So the guidelines for taking it out are through a resolution, and you'll see that on the agenda tonight. And I did put in the wording that said up to an amount not to exceed 2 million. So certainly as the fiscal 18 financials come in, as, you know, TIF money starts to come in, we don't we may not necessarily have to use all of it. My feeling is we probably will, because projects typically don't tend to go down in price, right? But you never know. So as far as replenishing it, my understanding, I mean, I've not asked the mechanics of that, but my understanding, and I don't know if Eric has experience putting money in instead of taking it out, but there are certainly always mechanical ways available to reserve a money into a working cash fund. Because every year that we issue bonds, we're actually going through the mechanics of, oh, the proceeds have to go to working cash, and then we transfer them out to capital. So there are always accounting methodologies that will allow you to put in and take out. There certainly isn't a statutory thing that says, nope, you used it, you can't contribute. So certainly if we find ourselves in that situation, I think because of the capital needs, we probably would be smarter to spend it on those needs. We certainly have healthy fund balances, and we do want to make sure we monitor those, because the board has committed to not going below or above certain percentages. Eric, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to add, at this point, I don't anticipate striving to replenish it. I just don't see where that's necessary. As Mary pointed out, it's kind of a fund that we have to use when we get bonds to put the money in so we can then dispense it and put it in our budget and that kind of thing. But I also want to point out what Mary just said, but we have very, very, very healthy cash reserves. And there's actually our guidelines and requirements set up now in board policy. We asked the board to put those in about 11, 12 years ago. We constantly meet or exceed those, and we will not be falling below that in our financial situation. For one thing, Mary more or less referred to it, but we were very interested in asking our bond counsel and our auditors, will this affect our AAA rating?
Yeah.
Highly important to me, certainly, but to all of us. And they said, absolutely not. But those cash reserves, it's vital that we keep those at the level that we've indicated we need to maintain.
Okay, thank you.
Very good question. All right, other questions? Thank you, Mary. All right. So we're at comments from the public. Dr. Davis?
Yes, we have one comment from the public. It's Carrie Levin. And what I'll do is, public comments are 3 minutes. And I have a timer here. I'll let you know when there's about a minute left. And then the timer might go off, and I apologize in advance when it does that. Sure.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Carrie Levin. I'm the Executive Director of Evanston Case, and we provide support and advocacy services for Evanston families whose children have disabilities. I want to thank you, Dr. Bavis and Mr. Baum, for bringing up some of the issues regarding the state report card data for kids with IEPs, and certainly your mention of some concerning data points in that report, and I appreciate your attention to that. I did write a letter that I sent to all of you today, recognizing that you probably wouldn't have a chance to read it before now, and so I'll distribute a copy of that letter when I'm finished. But rather than going through the whole letter here, I just want to highlight some examples of things that really struck me. And in particular, I'm going to hone in on math. The percentage of District 202 students with IEPs who met or exceeded standards declined from 22% in 2017 to 4% in 2018, 4%. And at the 4%, this actually dipped below the state average, which is 6%, which is also really sad. The other thing I want to mention is that the dynamic learning maps assessment, the DLM, is a test that students with cognitive disabilities take instead of the SAT. And it appears that either it wasn't reported, or perhaps there was a mistake on the report card data, but it says that there's no data available for 2017 and 18, so I did have a question about that. The other thing I had a question about was the data regarding chronic absenteeism, and this is either a mistake or it's terribly concerning, and that is that, where'd it go? Oh, the report card shows that 58.4% of students with disabilities experienced chronic absenteeism. That doesn't make any sense to me. I pray it's an error. And Dr. Bavis, you mentioned the data point around AP classes, and when you look at the report, you just see asterisks. And the reason for that is that there's no data reported if less than 10 students, 10 or less, are being accounted for. And so, to your point, we should probably figure out what's going on there with kids with IEPs and AP classes. As a board, you've made a bold and worthy commitment to increase to 100% each student's academic and functional trajectory to realize college career readiness and independence. The test results for students with IEPs, and particularly their declining scores and ballooning achievement gap, is deeply concerning and unfortunately reflects a predictable rate of achievement in this group. Furthermore, our students are performing at levels below students with IEPs statewide, in which, if you've already commented on, is very low to begin with. CASE would like to see the district delve into the academic performance of students with IEPs, evaluate the data, and develop a plan to intentionally address these areas of concern with an eye toward improving outcomes for these students. And we look forward to hearing from you about that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. That concludes public comment.
Okay. Thank you. All right, next we have FOIA. I think there are 4 in our packet.
Yes, therefore, the responses are in your packet.
All right. Do we have any board committee reports? I don't think I've seen any committees meet over the last few weeks.
It's not an official report, but I was at the curriculum forum, and I wanted to really acknowledge the work of our teacher leaders and department chairs, just the depth of their thinking around new courses, changes in courses, their willingness to be really honest when they didn't, they really needed to think more about something, and then the cross collaboration among, fine arts and PE and, really asking each other good questions and trying to unpack and understand the ramifications of a new class. So I was just really impressed by their work, and Pete talked about the outcomes of that work, but watching the sausage be made a little bit was really, really fun, and I was just really proud that they do such deep work, so thank you.
Excellent. All right.
I just had a committee-related question. When is the policy committee going to meet again? Is that going to be anytime soon?
We have a webinar coming up for the new press release, press policy release. So once that's complete, we're looking at, I believe that's in a week. Then they should release it, and we should be able to get something on the books early December, late that last week in November, or early first week of December.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Student board report, Phoebe.
Okay. So right before the joint board meeting, the quarter ended. So first quarter is officially over, and second quarter has officially begun, as of like 3 weeks ago. But it's fine. So that was really good to like get through the first quarter, because I'm a senior leader at ETHS. So that means like in gym classes, I like work with underclassmen, and I currently work with freshman boys. And it was really, really interesting to like see them the first week of school, right when first quarter began, and how they kind of like, and I know the gym class is a little different, but just to like see them grow into themselves and like really like become comfortable at ETHS was really, really nice to see. After that, actually on the day of the joint meeting, that Monday, myself and then 2 other seniors, Liana Wallace and Molly Hartenstein, met with J.B. Pritzker, which was super cool because he won the election. And we basically talked about, it was a meet and greet set up by Daniel Biss, actually, and we talked about gun violence prevention issues, and just like, I think he just wanted to meet with us to like hear what students have been doing. And one of the biggest things that we touched on was that Daniel Biss mentioned that he gets around, if he were to get 100 calls from constituents, that would be like a very major thing that would happen, and something that that issue that would be called up on would be something that he paid attention to. And that brought me back to last year when ETHS planned their walkout, and we ended up calling Representative Schakowsky and all of these different people, and then Representative Schakowsky came to ETHS in response to us actually calling her. Like, that was the reason why she came, was because so many people called her. So now what myself, Liana, and Molly, and hopefully other ETHS students from all grade levels are gonna try to do is to contact other schools in the Lake County area to try to, get them kind of like on board with this like initiative that we're trying to continue. Because I know that it was, gun violence prevention was a very big deal last year, because of everything that happens, and like it's still continuing on. So we just want to make sure that students at ETHS and students everywhere are like still supporting this effort and still making sure that this doesn't stop being talked about. So that was super cool. And then the Witherbell Forum was on Monday, November 5th. So just quick reminder, so the Witherbell Forum is a full day of Dr. Campbell and Dr. Witherspoon in our hub, and other administrators are invited. So Dr. Robinson stopped by, along with other few administrators. So basically what they do is they filter in and out during the school day to discuss any issues that are brought up at all. So Student Union, which was formerly Student Senate, hosts it and they facilitate it. And we create table topics and then create open-ended discussions. So the table topics this year were gender, race, PE, school safety / school violence, discipline, sexual assault / harassment, curriculum, mental health, school day, and miscellaneous. And we really got a lot of feedback this year. We had, in multiple periods, 1 through 9, we had over 100 students come, which was like a lot compared to our first year when we had some class periods that only had like 30 or 40 people. And this is the 3rd year that the Witherbell Forum has happened, so to like see that type of growth is really, really cool. So currently, Student Union is like reflecting on the conversations that we had, and we're compiling the written feedback that was given to us, and we're gonna present that not only to the administration, but also to the board next meeting. So you guys will see like truly what student experience is at ETHS, and the issues that like truly students are experiencing and care about. A few like big ones that stuck out, I'll give you a sneak peek, is just the difference between making up an absence in PE class is very different from any other class. And it's like quite disruptive to the flow of a student's, like for AM support, it really comes down to running 20 minutes in the morning versus like making up a test. And that's just something that students have struggled with. And then also the current tardy and detention policy, we talked about how that's a lot more hurtful currently than it is helpful, just because of the way that the whole point of tardies is to try to like reduce the amount of tardies that there are in general. But then basically what ends up happening is you're a minute late to class, and then you have to go to leave to get a pass, and you end up being 5 minutes late to class. And when the class is only 42 minutes long, it gets a little hypocritical at times. So that's what went on with that. So that was super cool, and that was 1 week ago on Monday. So we're really excited about the feedback that we're gonna get. And coming up this Thursday and Friday is the SOAR conference. And Mr. Winchester, who is the sponsor of SOAR, sent out an email, and in it he stated the purpose of the conference is to, quote, focus on the empowerment of students, the facilitation of courageous conversations, and developing anti-racist practices for the ETHS student body. The conference reaches out to every grade level at ETHS, as well as other schools in the area, like New Trier, and it's held at Northwestern. And I'm really excited about the conference. I unfortunately am not going to be able to go, but this conference is always talked about with anticipation, because every student who not only attends the conference, but also doesn't attend the conference gets something out of it. This event always creates conversations, and it spurs really critical discussions about race within ETHS. So I know earlier tonight we talked about how there's a lot more to academic success than just the numbers that we saw on the screen. And I think that the conversations that are happening, that SOAR is creating, are taking, like we talked about isolation, right? So like SOAR and other student initiatives like SOAR are taking these conversations that are happening into the bigger picture. So not only are we like exposing these conversations to students at ETHS, but we're going to New Trier and we're taking it to Northwestern. Like student initiatives like SOAR are really what's like bringing these conversations out into the open. and I'm really proud to be a part of that, so that's super cool. And then, quick last thing, fun fact, on Friday, this Friday, November 16th, is the day for the interviews for the new Evanston Police Chief, and 3 ETHS students will be participating on a community panel to help select the 2 most qualified finalists for this position. So we're really glad that students are a part of that initiative, which is super cool. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank
Pat,
you.
can I ask Phoebe a quick question?
Yes, you sure can.
Phoebe, we got some information, or I was reading some information today about SOAR, and I knew about the conference, but there were some other things like office hours and different things. Is that new, or is that something that's, I sort of knew about the board and I knew about the conference, but I didn't know about some of these other opportunities, and I was wondering if you know if that's new, or if I just didn't know and they've always been around.
Yeah, so I'm not a part of SOAR board. I actually have just had my first SOAR type experiences this year. And it's like truly been some of the most eye-opening like experiences of my entire life. And so SOAR office hour, I'm not sure if it's new. I think it might be. SOAR office hours is just like a space to have open and like courageous conversations. About race and also about other things. I've been to a few of them. The first one, we talked about like race issues within ETHS, and like a specific scenario that was going on was discussed. And so that was like the space to have that conversation. And that's what SOAR provides with SOAR office hours. And also the next day we had a conversation. This was during the Kavanaugh trial. So we had a conversation about sexual assault, and it was specific to ETHS. Just because that was kind of like, and that was also when Calvin Terrell was here, so, and he like touched on sexual assault a little bit as well. So I'm pretty sure SOAR office hours is new, and I think that that's what they're trying to do. I don't want to speak for them, but I think that they're trying to like expand and take these conversations out of isolation as much as possible. As many spaces as they can create, I think that they're trying to create, so, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that report, all that great information. All right, Dr. Witherspoon.
Well, tonight you saw how the ratings of schools are established, and one of those you saw was the 5 Essentials Survey. And just want to remind people that the parent component of the survey is already open. We've been distributing a link via email to parents, and that is open until February 15th. The student and the teacher surveys will be open December 11th, and those as well will go through February the 15th. So just a reminder to folks that you have some time to do it, but please participate in the 5 Essentials Survey. The art department's going to host its annual visual arts exhibit and open house this Wednesday night. You may recall that that is in conjunction with District 65, and there's artwork created by students all the way from kindergarten through grade 12. That's from 5 to 7 here at ETHS. Our career and technical ed department's going to be hosting engineering information night. That's on this Thursday night, on Thursday, November the 29th, and that's from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Again, we'll be putting out more information about that. But students in grades 8 through 11 and their families are invited to come and learn more about Project Lead the Way and our pre-engineering classes at ETHS. Also this week, Career and College of Career Services is going to be hosting their college prep and planning evening for freshmen and sophomores and their families, and that begins at 6:30 this Thursday night, November 15th, and that's held in the auditorium. Again, that's something we have been doing now for a few years. Our ETHS board members are going to be hosting a special event later this month here at ETHS. We've already been distributing information about that. It's Community Conversations with the ETHS board. It's going to be held on Tuesday, November the 27th in our Welcome Center beginning at 7 p.m. And all of those in the school community are invited to learn about the role of the board and hear an update on the implementation of the district goals and be able to have time to share their own perspectives on the work that they're seeing done in the district. Our Student Services Department is going to be hosting an event as part of their Family Talk series that is going on this school year. The next one is Wednesday, the 28th. This program is entitled Mental Health and Your Developing Teen. We'll have Dr. Melissa Blount here as a guest speaker who will discuss mental health issues that teens and young adults face in today's society. Our Special Education Information Night for incoming families is going to be held on December 6th from 6 to 8 in the evening. Again, more information is being distributed to 8th grade families through their special education department. So all of that going on. In addition, there are several concerts and performances coming up. The Jazz Big Band concert on December 4th. The play It's a Wonderful Life is going to be presented December 13th through the 15th. The annual Holiday Musical Festival is on Sunday, December the 16th in our auditorium. And in addition to that, we once again have now launched the annual Dean's Canned Food Drive. That began today, goes through the end of this week. They accept non-perishable food items as well as monetary contributions, and all of this goes to ETHS families to help make their Thanksgiving a very special Thanksgiving. In addition, our annual gift drive, sponsored by Community Service, will begin Monday, November the 20th. That goes through December the 10th. People receive slips of paper or mittens indicating different donations that are needed, and those do pour in, and we encourage everybody to take part in that. Again, the gift drive is for families that can have an extra special celebration over the holidays as well. And finally, we will be closed for Thanksgiving recess next week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So we do wish everybody a very happy holiday break. And I just want to point out that we may be entering the holiday season where a lot of places slow down what's going on, but you might have noticed that at ETHS, as this season gets underway, the activities and the opportunities for students and their parents just continue to multiply. And so we're going to be a very, very busy place in the next few weeks. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are at item 14. I'm now officially convening the 2018 levy public hearing. This public hearing is being held due to the district's intent to adopt an aggregate levy 5% in excess of the 2017 levy. Ms. Rodino, did you publish notice of this hearing?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did publish the notice on November 3rd.
Okay, thank you. The proposed levy will provide funds to support the usual expenses of Evanston Township High School. An amount in excess of 5% overall increase is to be levied to ensure that our extension base increases by the tax cap CPI of 2.1%, plus any new property and expiring Washington National TIF property.
Okay, anyone desiring to present testimony may do so at this time.
Ms. Rodino, do you have any comments?
I do have a short presentation, and I promise I'm going to keep it brief.
Okay.
I'm the only thing standing between you and the consent agenda and action items, so. And then after that, we can take board questions if there are any. Just a quick reminder about the dates. We published the legal notice. Tonight's the public hearing for truth and taxation. The December meeting, we only have one, and so the tax levy will be adopted. And because the board meeting is a little later this year, that doesn't give me a lot of time to get this stuff filed with the county. So we'll be doing that right after the meeting because there is a deadline right around Christmas. So we don't want to take a chance on that. The tax levy terms I won't go over, but there are things, you know, corporate levies, debt service levies, all of these technical terms that we work with when we're calculating and submitting the levy. Be happy to give you details on that if you are so inclined. Our budget does consist of two different levy payments. We, as I mentioned before, we do get a spring tax payment, which is an estimate of the previous year, and then the second payment in the fall is really finishing out that levy. And so we do budget that separately on the district's financial statements. We are subject to tax caps, which limits the amount that we can tax. It is a number based on last year's amount, and we're limited by either 5%, which we've not seen that in my time here, or the prior year consumer price index. So this year, it's kind of odd, but our two blended rates both happen to be 2.1%. So our rate is 2.1% for the levy cap rate. Now, the reason that the publication and the actual levy documents will be higher is because you have to increase the percentage so that you can capture any new property, which is something that happens every year, and in this case, a large expiring TIF district from the city. So that's why the levy increase, which is 4.8%, not including the piece of the debt service levy, which pays our bonds, looks higher than it normally does for us. And so we want to make sure that everyone understands that that's not an extra burden on the taxpayers. That's really that increment. You know, there's a nominal increase to all the bills, which is that CPI number, but the larger portion of the percentage is really just to capture those new dollars. The levy itself, which the majority is for the education fund, obviously, is just under $72 million. The debt service actual tax levy is calculated when the board does approve and we issue bonds. The county actually calculates what the levy needs to be in order to pay the debt payments on those bonds. So that's actually how that's calculated. On an average home in Evanston, we've estimated that the actual increase that is due to our increase in the percentage is about $75 for an average home in the city. Just some reminders, 2016 was a reassessment year, so the next reassessment year would be 2019 for us. And I think I presented this to you last year, but there was a significant increase in the EAV from 2015 to 2016 when that reassessment took place. So we would probably expect to see a similar, if not greater, increase in 2019, but I certainly don't have a crystal ball on that. That's just what I would expect that the trend would be. As I mentioned before, the Washington National TIF was closed by the city. That's been in operation for 23 years. So it's now time to close that down and let the other taxing bodies share in those tax revenues. So as I mentioned before, those are newly generated property tax dollars. The city has been receiving those for all of this time, but they don't affect the other taxpayers within Evanston. So there is an annual meeting that the city coordinates between the taxing bodies regarding their open TIF districts, and that's called a joint review board. That is scheduled and will meet just after Thanksgiving. So both districts are always in attendance at that meeting, along with Oakton and some of the other smaller taxing bodies. So I will be there on the 26th just to kind of get any other updates. But they have, my understanding is they have already filed the paperwork in their October council meeting that will close the TIF. And that's all I have.
All right, it was short, as you said, but thank you. Very informative. Okay, questions from the board? Okay, there are no questions. All right. So, hearing no further testimony, and I assume there is none, I now declare this hearing closed. All right. So moving right on with our agenda, we are at the action items. And the first item is a resolution abating the working cash fund of the district. I think that we heard about this earlier, so is there a motion?
So move.
Second. Roll call, please.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, the next item is the consent agenda, which consists of acceptance of Illinois School Report Card, approval of minutes from October 29th, 2018, and October 29th, 2018 closed session meeting, and October 29th, 2018 regular meeting. The treasurer's report from September 2018, approval of bills, personnel agenda, which includes appointment to staff, safety, change in status, stipends, resignation, certified and safety, retirement, exempt, and an addendum, which includes a change in status, stipend, leave of absence, maternity, certified, amended, other, suspension, and certified. Can we have a motion, please?
So move.
Second?
Sorry.
Was there a second?
I'll second, yeah,
Okay.
we tied.
Okay.
Can I make an amendment before I just want to pull the forensic bill again? Because I would just, I'm trying really hard to just make a standing request to get the bill, and then I can not make the motion to separate it out ahead of the vote.
Okay.
But for the time being, anyway, that amendment. Happy to vote on the rest of it.
And I actually have a question. So what does it mean to accept the Illinois School Report Card? Because we'd had some discussion about concerns about numbers, and I just don't know what that actually means.
All that means is, by law, the board needs to accept it, which indicates that you saw it.
Okay,
and we
thank
reported
you.
it to you.
Perfect, thank you.
Doesn't mean we like
That question comes up all the time.
Yeah,
Right.
accept it. Okay.
sorry.
Good question.
You've been sitting here a little longer than me, Gretchen, so.
I meant to say it's a good question. I mean, I almost asked it again.
So we have a motion with an amended, so it's an amended motion on the table.
So we're voting on the
So we-
consent
Consent-
agenda
Minus
minus the
Forensic
Minus the
bill.
forensic bill,
Okay.
exactly. Yes. So given that amended motion, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, I'm confused.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You good?
Yeah, so are we voting again?
Now we have to have a vote
Now
on
we
the
have to have
forensic.
another,
Okay,
now we
that's
have to have another
Okay.
motion to approve the forensic bill.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Abstain.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, so we are at old and new business. Do we have old or new business? Hearing none. Do we have a polling? Does anybody have any comments to add? All right, then motion to adjourn. Keep forgetting, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Don't you dare. Okay, thank you.